Morning, everybody. Oh, let's do that again. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mortgage Coach Friday Mastermind, where we are missing Dave Savage and Todd Bookspan today, so they have left me in charge with quote, "We know you will crush it and create one of the best all-time Friday interviews." So no pressure, right? And thankfully, as a high trust graduate, I understand the law of leverage. So I have invited Todd Duncan today to be our special guest, where I know without a doubt we will make this the best Friday mastermind yet. So how are you, Todd?
Claim it, dear. Claim it. I'm doing great. Happy Friday.
Yeah. Well, real quick before we dive in, for any new loan officers on today's call who may not know Todd Duncan just yet, as we know, there's a lot of new loan officers coming into the industry and really just this mortgage coach community. Allow me to give just a brief introduction to what CNN has called the Tony Robbins of the mortgage industry. So, Todd is a sales entrepreneur with over 5 million students around the globe that he has mentored and taught in the real estate and mortgage space. And what you may not know is in his first career, he was just like one of us. He was a real estate broker, a licensed loan originator. I want to say starting around 1982, if I'm correct. So clearly you have weathered some storms of, interest rates going up and down, the markets going up and down, and yet still successfully negotiated and financed over 5,000 real estate transactions in just 12 years. So with that success, he launched the High Trust Company with a vision of transforming how sales professionals build high-performing real estate and mortgage practices. And he has spent his life teaching and equipping professionals with the power of high trust as the key catalyst in achieving just their professional and personal dreams. As the leading authority on trust, he helps business professionals accelerate emotional connection with clients, increasing conversion and setting the client up for a lifetime of loyalty. Todd is a highly sought after, game-changing speaker presenting solutions for the real life challenges that businesses and professionals face every day, giving them vision, confidence, and a plan to get more out of business and life. His mantra is trust yourself, your relationships, your faith, and your future. When you do that, you set in motion a universe of possibilities. So
Wow.
I'm excited. Talk about an intro. If you haven't met Todd, this is Todd Duncan.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Good to be with you.
Yes.
Deborah, thanks so much for hosting. We're going to crush it today, dear.
Oh, I without a doubt, I trust. Wink, wink. I trust we will. So let's jump in. You titled this The Decision of a Lifetime, Fear or Faith. So you got to unpack that for us. What does it mean just for our lives, the lives that we impact in either, the mortgage and real estate space, and really just life in general?
Yeah. So I think that the reason why it's a decision of a lifetime is because whatever you choose to believe and to experience is going to be the gateway through which you either go into your best potential, your best opportunity, your best possibility, your best life, your best health, and all the goodness that you want, notwithstanding for a moment that life does throw us curveballs. But if we understand the decision, it is either going to give us access to, or it's going to block us from our true potential. And what ends up happening, you mentioned, when I got into the loan business, if you've watched, I'm pretty much on a news fast right now. I'd rather be like uneducated and happy than kind of educated and depressed. But, I watch enough to know that the markets are going through a lot of interesting and weird changes. I know that a lot of loan originators are trying to get back to the purchase business. And certainly, it is the mainstay of any business. We hear about inflation. We hear about runaway expenses and CPI and consumer confidence. And we hear all that messaging and we see see all of those things going on. And then if we got into the business in the last 3 or 4 years and we had a fairly decent run with refinances, we don't have a perception of what really a real market looks like. And this is not only a real market, it is a real raw market. And there is a boat ton of volatility. And so when we look at human construct, we look at how do you perceive what's going on? And when you perceive what's going on as threatening, as negative, as even uncharacteristically challenging, and you don't have the right layering of how you move from a fear-based mindset to a faith-based mindset, you will freeze at some level. And some will become totally paralytic because fear is so great in their mind that they don't know what to do. And some are just going to be a little bit more passive because it's safer than taking action. And then, of course, on the other side, you're going to have the people that understand that the absolute antithesis of fear is faith, and faith embodies this idea of confidence and forward progress. And so I'll build a case. When I started doing loans, the economy that I was in is the economy that the news factory today is saying is the worst in 40 years. So when they talk about today's economy being as bad as the economy of the 80s, I'm in that category, right? And I was in a sky is falling mentality. Everybody in the business was saying nobody's going to buy. Prime was 20, govies were 16.5, 17%. First and second weighted piggybacks, 18.9%. Unemployment was 11 or 12%. Consumer confidence was in the tank. Nobody had optimism in their swagger, right? And so it was interesting because I learned then as a brand new loan officer that the market, and this is really important for everybody to hear, the market doesn't dictate your success. You dictate your success in whatever market you're in. And it's a really important thing to remove your identity from the market, because if you don't remove your identity from the market and the perception is the market is tough, your identity, your self-identity is going to be stalled out. You're not going to think differently, uniquely, positively. You're not going to be forward thinking. You're going to be more calibrated and more reactive, and you're going to be more safe. And when we're safe and we don't take action, we don't take advantage of a bad market. So what I chose to do is I chose to choose positivity. And it's a much deeper conversation as we get into this, Deborah, about it's not as simple as just, having a positive attitude. But I can tell you right now, any difficult market requires that to access entry into this faith mindset. And what does faith mean? Faith means that instead of having fear, which is fright, paralysis, uncertainty, all of those negative emotions, what faith means is the opposite of that. I have confidence, I have hope, I have excitement, I have uniqueness. I really realize right now that if I feel and think that way, and the industry feels and thinks the other way, I've essentially eliminated competition. So we know that for about every 10 people in selling today in the mortgage space, around 4 to 4.5, sometimes knocking right on the door of 5, almost half of the industry is locked in fear. Of the other half, you split that in half. And so we have the top 25% that are not locked in fear. They've been here before. They've done this before. They've gone through interest rate changes before. And so they can tap in to that anchor and move forward with faith and confidence. The other 25% isn't in either place yet. They're not paralyzed, but they're not confident, and what they do next determines their forward progress. When we look at fear, we just have to remind ourselves that fear is not real. Fear is something that we interpret as an emotion, and that interpretation determines how real it becomes for us. And when we look at fear as worrying about something that may not happen, which, you take that word fear and it's false expectations appearing real, we put out to what's going on a negative outcome. When we put out to what's going on negatively, it bounces back in that field of energy as negative. when we're able to put out on the other side of that, okay, I'm going to face this market, fear, face everything and rise. It's the same word, but I'm not going to be neutral or passive or paralyzed. I'm going to, in faith, confidence, preparation, and hope, move forward. Then, when I'm able to do that, I go to the final layer of fear, which then converts to faith. And that is not only facing everything and rise, but now feeling excited and ready. And today, loan officers in a tumultuous market, a market of volatility, of highs and lows, interest rate hikes, costs, confidence, all those things, they need to be feeling excited and ready right now because the market is hugely rich with opportunity. So that's why it's such an important decision. Fear, faith. Whatever path you go, it's going to shut the door or open the door to your potential. And that's why it's a decision of a lifetime. We have so much that we can achieve if we move from fear to faith.
No, that's so timely because just even with my clients and some mega producers that we all know and love dearly, they have, mentioned to me their biggest struggle is the loan officers that they serve in their branches. That's kind of been their biggest pain point as a branch manager is how do you handle the fear and the lack of confidence that has been adopted by these loan officers that they're all kind of just freaking out. So these branch managers are like, stop freaking out, have faith, have confidence. And it reminds me of something you taught me, hope, hold on, pain ends. And if you just hang in there and you have faith, which as you were, sharing what you just said, I kept thinking about really the root of all fear must be a lack of trust. So with that, and knowing that your big idea has always been trust matters, how important would you say trust is today when you talk about the 360-degree effect and what does that mean?
Yeah. I think the first thing I like to say, because you opened the door for this, is I was interviewing somebody yesterday. I'm doing a series called Celebrating Leadership, and I'm interviewing 50 CEOs and heads of production, and I'll be releasing these over the summer. And I had a conversation with a head of production yesterday, and one of the things that I asked was the question, what did you grow up thriving on as an originator that now you see the industry not doing anymore? And it was a really sincere question. And he said, without really blinking an eye, he said, sales meetings. And I said, tell me more about that. And he said, we have lost the art of equipping our loan officers for success through a lot of ways. But one is this coming together of community that, when I grew up as a loan officer, it was every week. We had a 90-minute meeting every Wednesday morning, and that meeting was bathed in inspiration, motivation, and education. And the thing somebody can bring to the LO today that they have that LO doesn't have is the experience of going through tough markets. And you have a responsibility if you're leading anybody to lead them through this market. And you have that responsibility because you are a leader, and you have that responsibility because it's the right choice. And you have that responsibility because you could actually transform a life right now if you help people on your team think differently, right? So when we look at trust and we look at just the word, it's such a small word with such a huge impact. In fact, I think it's the most important word on the planet. And I think that it begins with this idea of if you don't trust yourself, you have no access to anything that's going to allow you to enjoy and experience the greatness that not only the business has to provide, but that life has to provide. And you think about this and you go, how many people wake up and for whatever reason, in any endeavor they attempt to do, they don't have high self-trust? Just think about that. Think about for a moment that if you don't have that, what do you do? And, it's scary because if I don't trust myself in my ability to make relationship-based calls, to set appointments, to have conversation, if I don't trust myself in doing that, I'm either not going to do it or I'm going to lower my standard and do it with people that have less of an impact if it, quote, goes wrong. So self-trust is the most important trust, and it gives you access to everything else. Let me just take a sip here and then I'll explain. So I think the thing that that goes into this self-trust and faith piece, right? There's three words that everybody needs to write down, and it doesn't matter to me if you apply it to yourself right now or if you apply it to your team or some combination thereof. The entire self-trust mechanism is based on four things, three words and one outcome. The first word is competence. So for anybody to have a high level of self-trust, they have to first go through competence building, which is getting good at what you're supposed to do, right? Once I understand the competence piece and I'm able to through practice and through modeling and through even experimentation and trial and error and failure-based positivity, when I'm able to do that, then I move from competence to confidence. Okay. So think about the difference between having no competence, which then cuts off access to confidence, to spending the time to get competent, which then opens the door to confidence. Now, get back to fear and faith. Am I more likely to move forward on faith if I have more confidence, or am I less likely to move forward? And the answer is I'm more likely. So if competence is happening, confidence is increasing. And then here's where the gap is for most people. The gap between confidence and compounding is consistency. And so if I'm not competent, I'm not confident, I won't be consistent in anything that produces positive self-trust. But if I gain competence, which then leads to a layer of confidence, and because I'm good at it, I no longer have a fear around it. I have not only a faith around it, I have an excitement around it. Then all of a sudden, I'm much more consistent. And what we need to understand is that until we get to consistency, we don't leverage the 80-20 rule and we don't unleash compounding. If we get to consistency because of competence and confidence, then the compounding takes place. And what that does then is it creates this 360-degree effect, right? So self-trust is the most important trust, and it yields two elements of intent and then two elements of competence. The intent is when I have self-trust, one gateway that opens up is humanity. The second gateway that opens up is transparency. The third gateway that opens up is capability. And the fourth gateway that opens up is reliability. So if anybody in the mortgage business today wants high self-trust and wants to leverage that into accelerating that trust in any consumer-facing conversation, they have to go through competence, confidence, consistency to open the doors to humanity, transparency, capability, and reliability. And it's interesting because the consumer experience, CX, right, or UX, however you choose to call it, has everything to do with humanity first, transparency second, capability third, and reliability fourth. Reliability is consistency. Capability is trust, giving you control to my life and my loan and my home and all of that. And it is the number one thing people need to understand in terms of converting people from conversation to clients for life. And that's what, and Deborah, it all starts with, do I trust myself?
You know, and when you break it down in a small manner, it's the small commitments that having a weekly plan, a daily plan, if I commit to saying to my team, to myself, to my partners, that I'm going to have 10 prospect calls every day, and I put that in my planner and I make the commitment to myself, did you honor that commitment to yourself? And are you tracking your numbers? And when you track and you see the numbers and you see the progress, it allows you to trust yourself, because now you can look back and you know that your success wasn't just based off luck. It was based off the daily activities that you made a commitment to yourself on, and you honored, and you did it. Because when you don't do it, and we all, hopefully I'm not the only one in this space where I say I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go walk or run 5 miles today, and I don't, or say I'll just do it later. I'll do it later. And every time I put it off, I'm like beating myself up because I made the commitment to myself and I didn't do it. And so sometimes it's just starting small, of just calling your database, having a target number every single day, and picking up the phone and calling, because that's all you can control is the attempt. So I love that. I agree. I think it does start with self-trust before you can even trust others. And then once you do practice, you build that confidence, and the consistency just leads to greater results. So I see that book on your desk right now, Todd. And I know that there's it's a special birthday. It's the 20th anniversary for your New York Times bestseller, high trust selling. And I cannot believe, I need to hear the secret sauce of why you think that this book is still selling, where most books, they peak after like a year or two.
Right.
So what's the secret?
Well, before we get into the secret of that, because there really isn't a secret, but I will tell you what I think has given it legs to stay around as long as it stayed around. I want to go back to just one comment that we make about this idea of setting goals and taking action. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that one of the big weights that gets in the way of self-trust is self-doubt. And the reason why self-doubt exists is because we don't experience as high a velocity of wins as we would like to experience. So until the business and until whatever other elements outside of the business, health and marriage and things like that, until we start to realize that I have to move from self-doubt to self-trust, the only way I can move from self-doubt to self-trust is not just to take action, but to take competent action. And I want to share one thought that it's really important for you guys to hear. So action without thought and preparation is dangerous. Okay, thought and preparation without action is useless. And so I want to de-emphasize it being about certain things, even to the extent where I could say it may not be about making 10 calls and getting yourself up for the 10 calls and then attacking. It might be getting good enough and getting competent enough where you literally can make half the calls or 1/4 of the calls and get the same net effect. And so when we look at this book and we look at what I'm trying to display to you as this decision of a lifetime, it is this understanding that if I'm not good and I just go out and try to set goals and make them happen, that alone is not going to get me good. What's going to get me good is the dress rehearsal. What's going to get me good is the practice. What's going to get me good is time on the horse, and we've got to understand that just the will to go out and do sometimes will have a backfiring effect. In other words, we think going out and taking action is really smart. It is if it's backed by confidence. Is really stupid if it's not backed by confidence. And that's why we have these phenomenons, and one that we can all understand is probably call reluctance. And you have 10 calls in a day and you get turned down 10 times, it's hard to get excited for the 11th call. But if you get really good at the calls and you make 2 or 3 and you get 1 or 2 to say yes, then all of a sudden you get more excited about making calls. You can't just take action without competence increasing, because that backfires. Now, getting back to the book, I think the reason why the book is still selling is because the laws still work. And it's interesting because when you think about the 14 laws that govern the high trust selling model, every one of those laws was written in 2000, 2001, and the book was released in February of 2012. But every one of those laws was based on a filter. And my personal filter when I wrote the book was the day after publishing the book, if I died, would the laws last 100 years? And as I thought about and went through that and looked at my writing team and then also looked at our focus groups, every one of the laws had a century of staying power, if not more. And it's so beautiful to understand what I've just said as truthful, because if you understand the idea that the concept of trust will never, ever, ever go away. It will never, ever, ever be displaced. It will never, ever, ever be redundant or obsolete. You just think about that. You start to understand, okay, the faster I get to mastering the art of the elements that go into a high trust life and a high trust practice, the better off I'm going to be. I've got a couple notes here that I wanted to pull out, and one of them is a report. So we use like 5 consulting companies on trust, Deborah, and one of the stats that I got yesterday afternoon as I was preparing for this is a 75-year trend on trust in America. And in 1958, when we look at everything from government, NGOs, financial services, and businesses, the entire country had a 77% trust confidence rating in any one of those 4 elements combined, right? So this is in 1958. We go all the way to 2019, and it dipped to 15%, and then popped back up in 16 to 25 to a high of 30%, and right now is back down to 17%. So the entire country as a populace that is measuring trust in a government, NGOs, businesses, and sectors like retail, financial services, so on and so forth, 1 in 4 trust what's going on. And that's just like, are you kidding me? So the way to look at that through a positive prism is, okay, all I really have to do is I got to master trust. Because if I master trust, I attract everything. And that's why it's such an important single word. And so the book is still selling because the laws still work. And it's interesting, the more you work the laws, the more the laws work for you. And it doesn't matter what the market is. It doesn't matter. It just simply does not matter. Your identity is not the market that's out there. Your identity is how you're choosing to be in the market. And in today's market, it's humanity, transparency. Then it moves to being able to have the reliability piece and the credibility piece. If you have that, you attract everything you need. 100%, you attract everything you need. So that's
for
why
the loan officer who's, maybe thinking right now, I can't, if you say anyone can win in ups or down markets, and maybe they have in their head right now thinking, well, I can't control the rates. I can't control the inventory. How am I supposed to win in a market like today when affordability is what it is and there's no homes available? What would you, because these are the conversations that branch managers are having with their loan officers that are just kind of throwing their hands up like, the market's just is what it is. And so our numbers are going to be what they are. What would you say to that?
I would say that if you think that way, you're going to be in the 80% that doesn't do any business. And if you think the different way, you'll be in the 20% that does all the business. I had a button made up when I was a loan officer. It was about 3.5 inches around, and it said, rumor has it we're in a recession. I'm not participating. So everybody that in 1981, 82, 83, 84, when interest rates were 15, 16, 17%, thought the sky was falling, they actually took themselves out of the market. So the population of buyers and sellers didn't even need to change. I just had to watch the competition go away, and I had access to that entire market. It didn't mean that the buyers are drying up or sellers were drying up, or that we were in a full-blown seller's market or a balanced market. None of that mattered. What mattered is I had 80% less competition because nobody was thinking that you could win in the market that we were in. And so when you understand that, and you understand it in today's market, we know things about the volatility of the market right now. We know right now that we're not in a buyer-seller balanced market. We know that we're in a seller-heavy market. In some markets, it's still defined as a seller-insane market, which means sellers are able to get any price they want, and buyers are lining up and trying to get their bids accepted. And so if they don't make it through that process, it doesn't mean they're not a buyer. It just means that right now they might have to make some adjustments. You know, a year ago, the interest rates that we had on home loans would buy you a $400,000 home. Today, those interest rates, all other things being the same, will buy you a $360,000 home. You know, rates have gone up, but that doesn't mean the will to buy has gone down. It doesn't mean that. And what it does mean, though, is if you're in the loan business and you want to get offers visually accepted, you have to do things that the competition isn't doing and isn't willing to do. You have to have, you know, different ways to present offers. You have to use tools that are differentiating and disruptive tools. I mean, I sold a property 2 years ago, and I sold it for $400,000 more than it was appraised at. And I sold it to a family with 2 young boys because I had bought that home with 2 young boys, and it just resonated with me. I could have made more money, but I wanted to have the legacy of my home being passed on to another family. So it was the ability for the lender to realize that, for the buyers to realize that this is their dream. And there's all kinds of creative ways that we can get offers accepted, 10-day closes, and, you know, cash guarantees, and all kinds of that. It's just, it doesn't matter, man. I mean, if affordability is difficult for the millennials right now, which it is, we're going to watch builders change their building strategy. We're going to watch community projects come on in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years that are going to be uniquely different. They're going to be multiple residents on one property. They're going to be, you know, smaller communities with you know, smaller square footage, larger density, but they're going to be reasonably, you know, attractive to the buyers that still have the ability to buy. And there's 72 million, you know, Gen Y and millennials right now. If you put, no, there's 140 million if you put Gen Y and Gen X together, not Gen Y and Gen Z together. And you look at that and you go, shoot, how many of those do I actually need to make a living? Like 200 loans a year? So there's plenty of people, right? There's plenty of people. And then the other thing is, put yourself in a position right now where you understand the value of retention marketing. This is why plug and play and what you do, Deborah, is so important, is that every buyer today that misses out on a deal is still going to be a buyer next year and the year after and the year after that. And so your responsibility today is to build a top of funnel strategy and understand that if the reality is not every buyer is going to be able to buy a house today. Okay. And yet, you know, appreciation last year was nationwide, all things in, just under 18%. This year, all things in, it's going to be just under 5%. So real estate's still a great investment, even though interest rates have gone from 2.5% to 5.5%. You know, and then you look at how long you're going to hold it, and does it really matter if you're going to pay more interest rate rise right now? No, doesn't matter. None of that matters. So you got to be unique and different, and you got to bring like solutions today that the rest of the industry is not bringing. And if you do that, you don't have competition. I was taught this in my second year in the loan business. So this would have been at the end of 1982. If you don't want competition, do what they don't, go where they aren't, and say what they don't say. So go where they aren't, do what they don't, and say what they don't say. And most loan officers today don't understand the advice game. They don't understand that the biggest part of humanity and transparency is understanding that buying a home is a big deal. And having stress about financing is a big deal. And carrying debt is a big deal. This is why rates don't matter. What matters is reasoning. What matters is emotion. What matters is, what's the payoff for you today in owning real estate? And if we can figure out what does it mean to you, instead of just, you know, talking about how to do it, then we have that leverage that the competition doesn't have access to. And I think that's why the mortgage coach community has such a important place right now in history. Simply because we are this community. I'm part of it because I helped Dave 25 years ago start Mortgage Coach. Bottom line is we are advice centric. And, if you have humanity and transparency, and then you back that with advice, people are going to trust you in spades. So anyway, that's a riff on that.
Well, I think it's important that when you earn that trust, maintaining it, because like you said, the motivation for people to buy will still be there, even if they can't afford to buy right now. So what is your strategy and your game plan of that retention to feed and maintain that trust when you first initially earn it? And I don't know if everyone has that strategy dialed in. So the other thing I thought of is just talking even about your book is what a great idea. I'm even considering doing this with my own group, is getting everyone a copy of the High Trust Selling Book and studying a law at a time, where if that was your sales meeting, going back to sales meetings at the very beginning, like you'd mentioned, are you having intentional sales meetings? And what if you just studied one law at a time and you broke it down and you applied it? Or even if you're a solo lender listening, you have a real estate mastermind that you have every single month, and everybody has the book. They bring that book that, if you can help them increase their sales conversions as your real estate agent, it's going to reciprocate. And you're studying it together, and you really make it a mastermind, something that you study. So thinking along those lines, which laws would you say, Todd, would be most crucial to start with in this market?
Yeah. The easy answer is all of them, but because you set it up to learn one at a time, it is interesting, right? And so as I think about this, and as I think about the impact that I know that trust brings to the marketplace, the first thing that I would probably bring up is the law of the hook. And the law of the hook is law number 12. And the law of the hook states a captivated audience will stay to the end. And the reasoning behind that is the value propositions that people bring to the marketplace. We're really not evaluated if we get one loan from one source one time, as much as we are getting multiple loans from that same source over time, right? And so the gap between that happening or not happening is the law of the hook. And when we did it's on the Todd Duncan playlist on the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel. When you go back to the concept that I talked about 4 or 5 months ago, talk less, sell more. The idea behind that was I need to find out what people really need and give them only what they really need as the catalyst for loyalty. And so it wasn't about necessarily, asking a bunch of questions and just going through some formulaic process. It was starting to own the idea that actually less questions are better than more questions. But in order for that to have impact, which is in this case, loyalty, you have to be able to get answers that you can then address, which is the law of the hook. And a lot of people think that the law of the hook is just marketing, which it's not. It can be, but we know the dangers also of auto marketing, which is what makes, I think, what you guys do at Plug and Play so valuable. But the idea behind the questions is the idea of, do I really, and this is important as I just look straight into the camera, do I really know what people want so that I can give it to them plus 10, 10%. Ken Blanchard wrote a book called Raving Fans, I don't know, 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And in that book, he said the key to success in any market, and this is so simple, Deborah, find out what the client needs, give it to them plus 1%. And it was just as simple as that. And so what I find today is that the top producers are relating differently to people than the rest. And they're relating differently in humanity and empathy. and transparency. And they're connecting more deeply because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a sales strategy. So the law of the hook is critical. The other law that we're really having a lot of fun with right now with our coaching members is the law of the hourglass. And the law of the hourglass is the gateway to the whole time productivity piece. And the law of the hourglass has always stated that you must make your best moves before your time runs out. And what we mean by that is if you've ever played a game that has an hourglass in it, and you got a game board and it's your turn and you turn that hourglass over, you have a limited amount of time to make your next move. And what we tell people in selling and people in business is the most successful people don't do more of more. The most successful people do more of less better. And when you do more of less better, what you end up doing is accelerating your hourly rate. So we track with our coaching members, we track hourly rate every 2 weeks. And then we ask them to think through, what are you still doing that could be delegated or offloaded, whether it's an internal person on your team or whether it's a company external to your team, but still fills that need. How much more valuable would it be if you did not allocate the hour or 2 or 3 hours to doing that thing? Which makes like your organization, Deborah, so vital, which makes, the assistance system so viable is, what do you really get paid to do? And if I'm looking into the eyes of anybody who is a professional local mortgage lender, what you get paid to do is influence and advise. That's it. And so you start to think about that and you start to think about, okay, well, in a market like we're in right now, it's even more important to get back to what really generates revenue. Because if we have so many people that are coming out of a refi mentality and their skills are dull, competence, confidence, consistency, to the purchase market, to realtor interaction, to builder interaction, to all of that, if they're dull, then we have to do more of the right moves, fewer of them, but we have to do those moves more and more and more because we have the opportunity to do that. So whatever I'm doing that isn't my highest and best use, whatever brain cells I'm using to do something that God has not gifted me in that category to do, is a colossal waste of time. And I advise people today, don't try to get good at what you're weak at. Don't even try to get good at things you think you should be doing if they're not the top activities to generate revenue. And coming up with your own marketing stuff is not a good way to dollarize your business. Having somebody on your team, having a third-party organization that specializes in it, that's how you scale revenue in a difficult market. You at the end of the day, and I'll preach this till my dying breath. At the end of the day, you get paid to do a couple things. One is, if you're a loan originator, you get paid to build relationships. Period. Okay, now the better the relationships, the more volume and the more loyalty you will get. So the decision has to be, you choose between transactions or relationships. I had to make that choice when I was 24 years old, and my mentor said, choose. You can make a living pursuing loans, transactions. You can make a fortune pursuing relationships. And so whatever you can do today to make that decision to come over here to relationships is what this book is based on. I'm signing business contracts this week with clients that first signed a contract 29 years ago. Okay, that's what you need to do to build a business. You need to build a business that is highly retention, highly residual income driven. You want to get away from earned income as being the biggest part of what you make. You don't want to spend money doing stuff that somebody else can do better, faster, and more consistently for you. big decisions right here. And I'll tell you straight up, when you come into our lowest level of coaching, the average hourly rate is about $47 an hour. At the end of 1 year, that rate is $419 an hour. In our elite group, okay, we have 33 people that made $92 million last year. They're making about $1,900 an hour for every hour they're working, $2.6 million a year each on average. That's just colossal. And none of them do most of the stuff. All of them do very few things, but they do it at scale and they do it well. And that law today, Deborah, that law is never going to change, man. You get 24 hours, right? You get 8 to sleep, 8 to do life, 8 to do business. And if you really start thinking about the law of the hourglass, the 8 to do business will become 6, the 6 to do business will become 4. There is no reason on the planet why you can't run a successful mortgage practice and work 30 hours a week and do it at scale, period. But you got to delegate and you got to outsource, which is, again, why what you do is so important.
Well, and I think it was this last High Trust Sales Academy in December that one of the loan officers raised their hand and had admitted to spending almost 3 hours trying to create their own graphic for an invitation to post on social media. And I don't remember the exact numbers that you were able to dollarize right then, what their hourly rate was and what it cost them, and the real opportunity missed of potentially building or deepening a relationship that would build revenue. But it was really mind-blowing, and it's such a powerful example where and just disclaimer, I always tell clients, you still have to be the face and the human of the business. So with focusing on the marketing, you have to do the part that's the video, the short form video, the part that's going to build connection. People feel conviction, your energy through what you're posting on media. Again, still being the human of the brand. What we help supplement is the screenshotable, shareable content that's more for the visual learners, that's sandwiched in to show that you're a competent thought leader beyond just an order taker or cookie cutter loan officer making the same types of social media posts that everybody else does. So a lot of people think I'm the genius. I just regurgitate a lot of the things that I've learned from Todd over all these years and following him on his podcast and YouTube and reading all of your books. I think I sent you a picture a couple months ago of everything that I've had. But, you mentioned this elite group and the fact that they make $1,900 an hour, which how many people do you have in your elite group?
33.
Wow. So what types of things are you teaching that caliber of a loan officer at that hourly rate to help recession-proof their business?
Yeah. The first thing I want to do real quick is, before we forget, let me just dollarize those 3 hours. So in the math that we're talking about that Deborah brought up, the person that was making this comment, I said, so how much do you make a loan? And he said $4,000. And I said, so if you spend 3 hours coming up with a graphic for your own marketing, that's 6 borrower consultations. Okay. 6 borrower consultations, 6 borrower consultations. And if you can convert 1 out of every 3, okay, so I've got 6. If I convert 2, okay, if I just convert 2, which is highly possible, and elite converts much higher than that, then 3 hours doing my own marketing cost me $8,000. And that's dollarization at work. You guys always got to think that way. And what our elite group is doing, probably more profoundly focused than ever, is I have challenged them to get the business to a level where 75% of the income is residual and 25% of the income is earned, meaning that most of the industry, most loan officers, their earned income is about 90% of their whole income, if not 100%. And the goal of being a high trust practitioner is to build a mortgage practice that allows you to make more and more money because of what you do in the business outside of the business. So that can be land investing, that can be real estate investing, that can be building teams, pod teams that are on your brand, but you're not actively having to manage or run those teams, and residual income comes out of that. It could be making investments in alternative affinity businesses. It can be, I was at a company 2 weeks ago in Nashville, and not only are they a mortgage company, but they're a title company, they're an insurance company, and they're a wealth management company. And so building affinity businesses like that. I think your sister, who is in Elite, has a roofing business. What a great affinity business to have as a lender, to be able to realize that, if I'm in an area that has, weather patterns with hailstorms and roofs get damaged, having that alternative business. And why is that important? Well, why that is important is because we all have an opportunity to have more and more revenue come in with less and less labor, which is just humanistically a really attractive thing to consider. And so, if I've got, 1 million people that are paying $1 a month, that's a great residual business model. If I have 75% of my loans every year coming in from non-traditional sources like financial planners, wealth managers, insurance, if I have that going on, right, and I have people running those pods, then that's residual income. That income is also highly leverageable, because any business that comes in from an affinity business that can be referred back to a core business like realtor or builder has economic leverage. And what I'm telling Elite is to create an economy for your traditional referral vertical by getting into these other verticals. And the final thing that we're telling them is move as fast as you can to what we call consumer-centric marketing. And consumer-centric is any business model that is not a realtor referral or not a builder referral. That's consumer-centric marketing. If we can get to that point by having businesses that we tie our business together in, then we create more and more residuals. So I think that's the power move right there. And I guess the other thing that we're challenging them to think about, and this is not for everybody watching this today, but it will be at some point in time, is succession planning. What are you going to do with your mortgage practice at some point in the future? And, we've got people that are doing ESOPs with their teams. We got people that are doing self-funded buyouts. I've got two father-son teams, and I've got 3 mother-daughter teams. And clearly there's a succession plan going on right now. And so to be able to build the business the right way, and then to be able to have the legacy of the family name continue to run the business, that's a very, very exciting proposition. And anybody that's in there, 35 to 45, that has kids that are, 5, 10, 15 years old, be thinking about it. Not every kid is going to want to be in the mortgage business that you might have, but there might be one. And it's really exciting to watch that you're able to do multi-generational lending. And, it's just smart. It's smart. If I've spent, 20 years building a brand, and my son can take over that brand and he can run it for 20 or 30 years, that's a really good thing. So those are some of the things we teach Elite.
It's so funny, because I have people that sometimes stare at us as we walk into restaurants or stores, and they're like, "Did you mean to have this many kids? You've got 4 kids." I'm like, "Yeah, law of leverage, baby. I've got a dish manager, a trash manager, a light manager. They help me. They're already being put to work. That's their rent that they have to pay every Monday. They have rent due." So I love it.
I talked to somebody, hang on, this is so important. I talked to somebody the other day, and we were outside, and he was talking about, I said, "So what's one of the most successful things you've done with your kids?" He said, "I never paid him allowance." And I said, "What'd you pay him?" And he said, "Commissions." And I go, "Tell me about that." He said, "I wanted everything that they did to relate to some commission that they could earn, not an allowance, because that's entitlement, but here's your commission." And he goes, "I'm growing these guys up to think labor in, commission out, labor in, commission out."
Well, that's so funny, because I tell them, nothing is free in life, and even room and board here, they still have to pull their weight. And so we got them those, old school check registers when you write a check, and you have to keep up, with how much your rent that you have. And then we would give them fines if they, 4 out of 5 of school, if they didn't have good behavior, if they got in a fight. And so that was their way of earning their keep, which I'm like, you guys can move out at any point. As soon as you can pay your own way, then have at it. You don't like my rules, you can live by your own as soon as you can afford to pay for it yourself. So it's been, I've used it in my favor quite a bit, to be perfectly honest. But okay, so we've got,
Somebody just posted in chat that they're going to use this for their kids. Let me say one
oh,
more thing based on what you just said. Don't pay your kids to do stuff that is part of being in the family. Commission them on stuff that's going to help them grow. And John Maxwell used to say years and years and years ago, and I did this with my kids, I paid them to read books and do book reports. And the book reports had to be a summary on a 2-foot by 3-foot foam board. And I got pictures of these guys at age 10, 11, 12, reading books that they never thought were going to benefit them and coming up with some of the most stupid, ludicrous kind of presentations on what they learned from the book. But my 25-year-old son today still tells me about the books he did reports on when he was 14, 15, 16. And the same with my 23-year-old son. My 23-year-old son is an entrepreneur. And he said, said to me the other day, he said, everything I learned in business, I learned from those books you made me read. But I paid them to read a book and do a report. It was great.
well, that my daughter had asked how she could earn her phone back. And I told her she had to do a book report. She read the 4 Agreements,
Yeah.
and then she read the Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And I'll tell you, she's become a mini coach and she's only 12. And that is the hardest accountability partner when you start teaching your kids some of the things that and then they start, like, she'll be like, that's mind over matter, mom. You can do this. And I'm like, you're right. Okay, so
Amen.
we've got about 5 minutes left, and I know we have the Modern Mortgage Summit coming June 8th. It's going to be held virtually. So if you guys haven't gotten your tickets yet, make sure you go to modernmortgagesummit.com. Todd is going to be presenting and has a segment for the summit. So Todd, give us a little preview of what you're talking about at the summit.
Well, it's exciting to be part of the summit. It's always exciting to be part of the mortgage coach community and Win by Noon. And my job, my privilege is to continue to be an innovator. And I think of myself as a sales entrepreneur. And so what I'm going to release in a 15-minute presentation at the Modern Mortgage Summit is I'm going to release the newest innovation on what I'm referring to as the 10-word close. And I'm going to give you some samples of how we can take a conversation and pare it down to the most insanely small element of interaction to create the largest level of buy-in and conversion. And it'll be the first time that I've dropped this on anybody. And then at Sales Mastery this year, October 11th through the 14th, we're going to go live again back at the Marriott Desert Springs Resort. And we're going to take that concept and unpack a 90-minute playbook on how to do that. And it's super exhilarating. In the meantime, if any of you have not read the Talk Less, Sell More white paper, just go to todduncan.com/talk-less-sell-more and download that document. It's a 20-page playbook that you can use with your real estate partners. And if you're a manager with your LOs, to really get them understanding the power of the new economy and how we have to dialogue differently about that. Beyond that, it's just Todd Duncan Official on our social handles. And it's always a joy to connect with people and help people win. So that's what's going on, Deborah.
We'll make sure that Robert, we put those links in the chat as well as on the YouTube channel in the comments so that people know where to find Todd. Todd, you also have a podcast. What's the name of your podcast so everybody can find you?
It's just the Todd Duncan Podcast, Where Success Happens, and we're on every major platform. So search me wherever you search me.
Sales Mastery tickets can be purchased at todduncan.com as well.
Yeah, we're going to give Mortgage Coach a promo code next week. And so you guys are going to be able to save some revenue off the retail price. So just wait for that to come out. And Robert, just remind me of that. We'll get it out to you guys next week.
Well, I already bought my ticket. I bought it the day it was announced.
Boom.
It was last year in December. So, okay, guys, well, to put
a great deal, by the way.
Do what? Oh, it was.
A great deal.
I did. Well, it's always a massive ROI when you go to a sales mastery event. So if you've never been to a sales mastery or even a high trust sales academy, that is the number one piece of advice I would give you all to give exponential ROI on your investment. So Speaking of ROI on your investment, you guys, if you've listened to this call, you've just spent an hour of your time on the best Friday mortgage coach mastermind call that's ever been had with Todd Duncan and I. And I want to encourage you all to now take competent action. Like Todd said, he focus on, we started this call with trusting yourself. What are the things that you need to do daily and to develop that self-trust so then you can also be trustworthy and trust others. Take competent action. Make sure you get that book, High Trust Selling, so that you can be a high trust practitioner. And I would really encourage you to then go serve, take those laws and go serve others with them, whether that's your team, your real estate partners, because like Todd said, you could actually net more by working with fewer if you just adopted some of these laws that he's talked about. And then 75% of your residual income. Wow, what
Boom.
a goal there. I love it. And then don't forget, get your ticket for the Modern Mortgage Summit as well as Sales Mastery. And guys, that is a wrap. Thank you for being a part of this, Todd. Anything you want to close with?
Nope, I just feel honored that I get to carry the torch for trust, and there's no downside to pursuing it with passion. And it's a joy to hang out with you. It's fun to watch you win, Deborah, and help you watch the community be impacted. And so I'm just grateful I had a chance to hang out today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time, Todd. And that is a wrap. Bye, guys.
Take care. See ya.